Hello. In this video, I'd like to explore the coil spring in a Luger mainspring versus the double S-shaped leaf spring in the older model. This is the newer model, the older model. This happens to be a 1911 DWM in 9mm. And this is a high potential or high probability test eagle used in the 1901 tests that the US Army performed. And this is chambered in 30 Luger. This is the one that has the lock over here. It's a little bit loose on this one. And so let's explore what's actually the disadvantages with the earlier leaf spring and what it can lead to. Mainly I'd like to talk about the imprint that the bottom tail of the rear toggle leaves on the frame as the gun is shot. Now this particular one, really the marking left is not as severe as some of the other old models with the leaf spring. This shows you typically what you would see in terms of frame marking. And this happens when the toggle train retracts fully and something is going to need to stop it. In the case of the leaf spring, which is more severe, it has a more severe collision than in the later design where the coil spring was used. Okay, so on this 1911 DWM, okay, this is the typically what the frame marking looks like. Let me see if I can zoom in. Okay, so it's relatively light in here. Okay, the ones with the leaf spring would really have a pronounced marking over there. And this one, to go back to this one, the old model with the leaf spring. Okay, you can see the pattern is a little bit different. Usually it's like here, and there, as I showed in the printed image. Here. All right, so the leaf spring has a nonlinear spring constant, meaning that the resistance is low or soft at the beginning movement of the leaf spring at recoil, and then it gets higher, okay, more resistance. So the spring constant is low in this position and it's going to increase non-linearly when the toggle basically retracts. And this is seen here very easily. You know, a light push would move this backward. Okay. On the other hand, if you take the one with the coil spring, you know, you really have to put, I'd say, at least 3 times the effort or more to move the receiver back. Okay. So with the coil spring, the spring constant is constant essentially throughout the travel of the spring. Okay, and that was an advantage when you'd have a scenario when the firing pin or the striker is cocked, you see. This still, if you move it up a little bit, it'll still go down. On the other hand, if we cock, you know, the striker, if we set the striker, and in this case, it's just, there's zero force to move this forward, and that's why those early old model guns required the toggle lock over here. And this is one of the complaints. In fact, even shooting the gun, this didn't come back all the way. And this is one of the complaints from the US tests, that this would just stop like that. And that's because the force exerted by the leaf spring is really, as I said, it's nonlinear and weakest when the leaf spring is in this position. So it doesn't have enough force to really close the breach like that. All right, now let's get to the reason for the more, generally speaking, severe marking on the frame with the old model where the leaf spring is used. Now, so if I basically lock the toggle like this, because the mag is there and the it activates the toggle lock. You see the leaf spring is already now at its almost maybe 95% of its back travel. It's over here and it's touching the frame. Okay, so there's little room for it to flex back and take and absorb the energy when you shoot the pistol. When the toggle in this position, this will also try to go back, and the leaf spring is already maxed out, if you like. And what would happen is that the that extra force or pressure in the toggle is basically going to be the tail here hitting the back of the frame, and it acts as a last resort stop of the toggle. Now this is not very desirable because it can really cause fractures of the rear toggle. Okay. But there was no really real solution for this because of the limited travel of the leaf spring, and then it doesn't have the enough dynamic range, if you like, to do more absorption of that last part of the energy, and that ended up leaving a pronounced mark on the back of the frame, or a collision mark. Now the 1911 DWM, obviously, by 1906, you have the new design with the coil spring, and that was a huge improvement. And if you lock this, toggle locked as before, you see that the spring, the main spring here, still has more room to compress, and meaning more room to compress and absorb energy from the retracting toggle. You see it? Here you can see. Okay? And that essentially would minimize the collision of the bottom of the rear toggle with the frame. Okay? So the spring is not maxed out, the main spring. It still has some room to store energy and relieve the backward or recoiling toggle and minimize that hit on the back of the frame. Now, obviously, you can have some of those guns with the main coil main spring, and you'd have a pronounced marking over here, and that could be either because the main spring for the load you're shooting is weak to start with, maybe a replacement coil spring or a very weak old main spring. But normally those The spring constants, the springs used for the coil spring, are designed for a given load. Let's say that the Germans used for the Luger 9 millimeter is balances, okay, it's well balanced. And it's a delicate balance because if the stiffness of the coil spring, if it's too stiff, this essentially won't allow the toggle to move back enough, okay? It might move back enough to eject the spent casing, but not enough to load the next round, and it have stove piping of the bullet, okay? So with the proper balance, it should be okay. So essentially, you want the main spring for a given 9 millimeter load, in this case, to move enough for this to open up almost fully, but not open up with enough force to cause a significant strike or hit or collision with the back of the frame, but would move back enough to properly load the next round. Okay? So that's essentially, it was a big improvement in the, leaf spring was kind of moved from the Borchardt into the, C93s into this design, and then ultimately the leaf spring was dropped, and this was the winner. So was it by design that you have a significant collision of the rear toggle with the frame to stop the retracting toggle? Well, I won't say it's really intentional, but you had no other choice. This maxed out the spring, leaf spring, and then the last resort was to cause that significant collision to stop the toggle. Okay, I hope that you find this helpful. Thank you so much.